When we think about medication safety for older adults, our minds usually jump to certain high-risk drugs. But what if that's not the real story? What if the biggest dangers are actually the most common medications, hiding in plain sight in millions of homes? Well, let's follow the data and see what's really going on. Let's start with a number, about 100,000. According to a major CDC study, that is roughly how many older Americans are rushed to the emergency room every single year because of a bad reaction to their medicine. Now, this isn't some small niche issue. It's a huge, hidden health crisis. So you gotta ask, right? Which drugs are causing all this damage? Logically, you'd point to the ones that are officially blacklisted, the ones labeled high risk for seniors. But what the research actually found is so counterintuitive, it basically flips everything we thought we knew about medication safety on its head. To really understand what's happening, we first have to tackle a really common, and what seems like a totally logical, misconception about where the danger actually is. For years, the strategy seemed pretty simple. Just create blacklists of high-risk drugs for older adults. I mean, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Find the bad guy drugs, tell doctors not to prescribe them, and boom, problem solved. This entire approach has trained us to believe that those officially inappropriate drugs are the ones to be afraid of. But here's the thing. When CDC researchers actually dug into the data, the real reasons people were ending up in the hospital, that data told a completely different story. And here's what they found. The results are just, wow. Take a look at this. A full 2/3 of all hospitalizations were caused by just 4 types of incredibly common medications. And what about those high-risk drugs we were all so worried about? They were behind less than 7% of the problems. The data could not be clearer. We've been looking in the completely wrong direction. So, what are these surprising culprits? Well, they're not some rare experimental drugs. They are the big 4 workhorses of modern medicine. We're talking about blood thinners like warfarin, diabetes medications like insulin, antiplatelet drugs that prevent clots, and other pills for diabetes. These are some of the most widely prescribed medications on the entire planet. The study's conclusion in the New England Journal of Medicine just nails it. The biggest problems come from a few commonly used medications. And this reveals something so important. Maybe the issue isn't that the drugs themselves are inherently bad, but that managing them is just incredibly, incredibly difficult. Okay, so that leads to the next big question. If these are such common, everyday drugs, why are these so hard to manage safely? Well, it turns out the answer might not be in the pill bottle itself, but in the person taking the pills. A more recent study from 2023, this one published in Curious, gives us a massive clue. Researchers looked into the connection between a patient's cognitive state and their ability to actually stick to a medication schedule. They zeroed in on what's called the human factor. And a key idea here is something called mild cognitive impairment, or MCI. Think of it as this: transitional stage. It's that in-between zone where a person's memory or thinking has slipped a bit more than you'd expect for their age, but it's not severe enough to be called dementia. It's often subtle, and it very often goes undiagnosed. Now, this study focused on older patients with chronic diseases. The exact people most likely to be taking those big 4 medications. And what they found was pretty alarming. More than 41% of these patients had mild cognitive impairment. And at the very same time, in that exact same group, almost half, nearly 49%, were not taking their medications correctly. This is called poor adherence. Basically, they were missing doses, taking the wrong amount, or maybe taking it at the wrong time of day. And here's where it all clicks into place. The analysis showed that the patients with MCI were over 2.5 times more likely to struggle with taking their medications correctly. The picture suddenly becomes crystal clear. The risk isn't just about the drug. It's about the patient's cognitive ability to manage that drug, an ability that MCI can quietly wear away. So, what do we do with this? Knowing the true cause of the problem means we can finally start building a smarter and way more effective approach to medication safety. What this really calls for is a fundamental shift in how we think about this. The old way was drug-centric. It was all about blacklisting bad pills. The new, evidence-based approach has to be human-centric. It means we have to switch from avoiding a handful of risky drugs to doing a much better job of managing the common ones. It means we stop assuming every patient can perfectly follow complex instructions and start actually assessing their ability to do so. The problem isn't the pill, it's the system for managing it. So the path forward is actually pretty clear, and it really boils down to three key actions. First and second, we have to improve how we manage blood thinners and diabetes medications, with better education, closer monitoring, and simpler routines. And third, and this is huge, we have to start screening for cognitive changes like MCI before a problem ever happens. This lets us give extra support to the people who need it most, preventing these errors before they can cause harm. And all of this leaves us with one last really critical question. For decades, we have focused on blacklisting a few supposedly dangerous drugs, while the real danger was a combination of very common medications and subtle cognitive changes we weren't even looking for. The data is telling us loud and clear that it's time for a new strategy. The question is, are we finally ready to focus on the real risks hiding in the medicine cabinet?